Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a pretty harsh reality, why so many developers get permanently stuck at the mid-level. It's a super frustrating plateau. And look, the truth is, the majority of developers don't stay junior because they can't code. They stay below the senior level because they genuinely think coding is the entire job. So we're going to unpack exactly why that mindset is keeping so many incredibly talented developers from ever reaching that next level.
Let's kick things off with a provocative question. If coding skill alone made you senior, why on earth do developers with 7 years of experience still act like juniors? Because the reality is, just writing more lines of code, mastering a new syntax, or learning the absolute hottest new framework, that is never going to automatically hand you a senior title. If it did, literally every developer with 5 years under their belt would be senior by default. But in real-world companies, seniority just isn't measured by lines of code. It's measured by ownership, clarity, and actual business impact.
So, let's dive into our first major roadblock: execution versus engineering judgment. You see, there's a massive divide between being just a coder and being a true engineer. A junior developer looks at a ticket and asks, okay, how do I implement this feature? A mid-level developer steps it up a notch and asks, what is the best, cleanest way to implement this feature? But a senior engineer, they step all the way back. They ask, wait, should we even be building this feature this way at all? They're actively questioning the core problem before they even think about writing a single line of code.
Let's put this into a real-world scenario. Imagine the product team comes to you and asks for a brand new dashboard page. If you're operating with a junior mindset, what do? Well, you probably jump right in, start coding the UI, setting up the tables, building out those API calls, and tweaking the filters. You just dive straight headfirst into the execution layer.
But a senior engineer takes a totally different approach. Before their fingers even touch the keyboard, they are rattling off critical questions. Who actually uses this dashboard? What specific decisions is it going to drive? Are we expecting to load 100 records or 1,000,000? What happens when the API is inevitably slow? What permissions do we need? They do this to guarantee that the execution actually solves the right business problem. And honestly, that is what real engineering judgment looks like.
That brings us right to roadblock number 2, thinking incomplete systems.
A huge reason developers plateau is a severe lack of system thinking. You cannot just focus on your one assigned ticket in total isolation. You have to map out the entire flow and understand how your specific chunk of code lives inside this much bigger, interconnected machine. The front-end UI connects to the back-end API. That back-end talks to a database. The database performance heavily impacts the end user. And hey, the error logs, they dictate exactly how quickly you can debug a late-night outage. A senior engineer understands this entire ecosystem, not just their isolated little branch of code.
Oh man, we have all heard it, and let's be honest, we've probably all said it. But it worked on my machine. Let me just be direct here. If you have ever uttered that exact sentence to defend yourself after a deployment broke, you are definitely operating with a junior mindset.
The crucial difference here is anticipating scale. A mid-level developer tests locally with, say, 20 rows of data, and hey, the transaction page looks lightning fast, but production reality is incredibly unforgiving. Out in the wild, there might be 2 million rows. Without proper database indexes or pagination, that exact same code completely crashes the server and freezes the UI. A senior thinks about database design, scale, and performance impacts long before real users ever encounter that dreaded frozen screen.
All right, moving on to Area 3, the communication deficit. This is honestly the silent killer of engineering careers. So many developers think, hey, I'm an engineer, I just need to write code, and I'm good. That literally could not be further from the truth. Remember this fundamental rule. Companies do not promote confusion. In real, high-functioning engineering teams, weak communication creates significantly more damage than weak coding. A developer who writes average code but provides massive clarity is infinitely more valuable to a team than a clever coder who writes highly complex algorithms, disappears for 3 whole days, and then suddenly announces they're stuck right before a big deadline.
So what does that clarity actually look like in practice? Well, a weak update is just something like, yeah, I'm working on it. That tells the team absolutely nothing. Now listen to a senior update. UI is done. API is 70% integrated. I'm currently blacked because the backend response lacks the total pagination count. I need backend support before I can proceed. See the difference there? A senior engineer reduces uncertainty, communicates risks early, and gives actionable updates that help the entire team move forward with complete confidence.
Now, let's talk about mistake number 4, the documentation problem. Most developers hate it. They treat it like boring paperwork and just assume their beautifully clean code will magically explain itself. But here's the reality check. Clean code is fantastic for explaining what a system does, but you absolutely need good documentation to explain why the system was designed that way in the first place. Why did we go with this specific architecture? Why does this API return such a weird structure? Why did we make these exact trade-offs? Your code simply cannot tell you the historical business context, but your documentation definitely can. Consider this carefully because it's a trap a lot of people fall into. If only you understand the system, you didn't build a strong system. You just built a massive dependency on yourself. Senior engineers document things because they know that relying entirely on team memory is a fundamentally weak foundation. When you leave the company or even just go on vacation, the whole team shouldn't grind to a halt. Good documentation actively protects your team from repeated confusion.
Which leads us perfectly into the biggest blocker of all, number 5, escaping the dependency trap.
You have got to escape this mindset if you ever want to grow. Let's look at exactly how different levels handle ambiguity. A junior gets stuck and basically says, "Tell me what to do." A mid-level takes a solid step forward and says, "I found the issue. Here are 2 options." But look at the senior level. I found the issue, evaluated the options, chose the safest path, and documented the trade-off. You're going to stay stuck if you're always waiting for exact instructions or someone to hold your hand through every minor roadblock. True seniority means moving the work forward independently.
We see this dependency trap super clearly in debugging too. Weak debugging is just throwing your hands up in the air and saying, "It doesn't work. Can you help?" Contrast that with a senior investigation. They say, "Okay, the API returns a 401. I checked the token cookie, the refresh route, and the auth guard. The token is expired, but the refresh isn't calling in the next JS route handler." A senior operates with incomplete information, investigates deeply, and brings well-researched solutions instead of just dumping raw problems right onto their manager's desk.
Okay, let's bring this all together for our final section, the true path to seniority.
We know what to avoid now. So what does the actual path look like? Well, let's test your judgment with one last real-world scenario. You're tasked with building a new withdrawal approval page for a financial app. Pretty much anyone, literally any developer, can build the HTML tables, add some colorful buttons, and trigger the API calls. But what happens beyond the UI? What are the hidden risks lurking underneath?
A true senior engineer might actually write a lot less code initially because they are so busy protecting the system. They're asking the hard questions. Who actually has permission to click this approve button? If a withdrawal is rejected, can someone go back and reapprove it later? Do we need strict audit logs for compliance? What's our failsafe if the API drops right in the middle of a request? And how do we absolutely prevent duplicate approvals if a user just double-clicks the button? They aren't just building a page. They're actively fortifying the business.
So here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. To level up, you have to stop measuring yourself by code output. Stop asking yourself how much code you wrote today. Instead, start asking, what problem did I actually solve? Did I reduce future bugs? Did I make this system easier to maintain? How much confusion did I remove from my team today? Business impact, risk reduction, and team clarity. Those are your new metrics for success.
I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Coding gets you into software engineering, but ownership is what makes you senior. If you want that title, you have to stop focusing only on how to write better code and start becoming the exact person the team trusts with the absolute biggest, most complex problems. So, are you ready to stop just writing code and start taking true ownership? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.